They nicknamed the fabric-covered aircraft the sticking plaster bomber. They much preferred to fly within the corrugated metal security of the dear old three-engined Junkers 52, with a total of 8,850 horsepower, and every single one of them would be needed. 3 long 10mm steel cables connected the glider to the tow planes, the arrangement going by the name of Troika Schlepp, or triple tow. The takeoff was in many ways difficult. The glider pilot lit the rockets as soon as the Troika started to move. The takeoff drill called for the Gigant to unstick first at around 55 miles an hour indicated. The 2 outer tow planes then left the ground, followed by the leader. The aim was to climb out at 80 miles an hour. And with 40 tons behind them, the tow pilots had their hands full. 110s were hanging on their props near the stall. The slightest drop in engine power could lead to a disaster. And disasters there were. On one test flight, the glider rockets fired on only one side, dragging the Troika together. 129 men, the glider was carrying troops, were killed. The parachutes are not, as one might suppose, the 3-man crew leaving the aircraft, but the burnt-out and reusable takeoff rockets. Hannah Reich, on her second flight, some 60 feet above the ground. It must have been just about the loneliest place on Earth, as he got the feel of the control surfaces, which were equivalent to the entire wing area of quite a sizable plane. A Junkers 90, one of the few big 4-engine planes that the Germans possessed, was used to drag the Gigant along the runway. Then, with the takeoff rockets going full blast, and the Junkers 90 flat out, the enormous glider was airborne for the first time. The first hurdle, dropping the 2-ton undercarriage, was cleared without incident. That first flight, according to German records, lasted just 22 minutes, though it may have seemed rather longer to Herr Bauer. However, he reported that the flight characteristics were good, though he did add that the controls were a bit on the heavy side, and suggested that a wider cockpit with a co-pilot to help with the pushing and pulling would make things a bit easier up front. This suggestion was adopted on the 101st glider to be built. The huge glider was brought in for a good landing on its skids, and immediately a shortcoming was apparent. After landing, the 40-ton aircraft was immobile until it was jacked up and the undercarriage was repositioned. However, this wouldn't matter when it was used operationally as an assault glider. Development flights continued, though the captain of the 5th flight, the redoubtable woman, they didn't, though it was obvious that the Junkers 90 was underpowered for the towing job. Its crews were reporting that they were barely able to keep a safe flying speed on takeoff, and this with a lightly loaded glider and the rocket assistance. Obviously, a more powerful type was urgently required. The Gigant glider might, at this distance in time, seem an absurd folly, but if the timing of events had been only slightly different, and if the gliders had been used in the role for which they'd been designed, assault, then 200 or so could have landed out of some dawn, just after Dunkirk, with 20,000 troops, 100 tanks and artillery in the Weald of Kent, and little more than the rifles of the Home Guard to contain them.